Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this evening seminar, The Benefits of Silence. This event is being organized by the Kuwait Harmony House Meditation Center and Bahrain Meditation Center. I'm Joanna, recently based in Greece, and it is really a delight to be in your presence. And really, we often say silence is gold. And yes, silence, as we know, is a great gift. It's a great quality that we all possess, yet can be a forgotten art in our hurried world. And for myself, as a meditator for the last 27 years, the precious golden moments of deep inner silence really helped me to see clearly the separation between the true self, the spiritual being that I am, and the role I'm playing, and also to bring the presence of God, of the Supreme, in my life. And I'm sure that silence means different things to each one of you. Today, our guest speaker is Wendy Farrington. And Wendy lives in Italy and has been a meditator for over 40 years, running a meditation center in Rome. Wendy's distinguished career includes being an Olympic skier for Great Britain from 1959 till 1964, and also a dancer and choreographer from 1964 till 1980, working in Rome and also Las Vegas, Paris, and Canada. She first came into contact with the Raja Yoga meditation practice in Paris in 1982. And since then has been sharing her spiritual insights both in Italy and abroad. Wendy participated in the activities of Casa Sangam, which is actually a silence retreat house in Kuwait, since the beginning in 1997. With a lifetime of experience and wisdom, Wendy this evening will share with us the benefits of silence. So let me invite you to really enjoy Wendy's presentation and practical insights into the benefits of silence. Please feel free to put your questions on the chat box, and at the end, Wendy will take them. So, over to you, Wendy.
Thank you very much, Joanna. That was a very kind presentation. Silence is something that grows on you. Originally one might think, silence is just a lack of speech. It means that you're not talking. It means that you're not communicating. And so it sort of sounds like, those moments in a conversation that you might be having at a dinner table when things go silent and there is this feeling of dis-ease in a certain sense, and you try and find a subject of conversation that everybody could appreciate, to keep the conversation moving. There is this need to fill silence with noise, words, sounds of sorts. But silence is actually something that grows on you when you practice it fairly regularly. It becomes almost a habit, and where you find that it's very peaceful, it's very friendly. It's a warm, friendly space that you actually can create within yourself. And basically, that is I think probably one of the great benefits of silence. Is the benefit is what you get from it. It's not only the pleasant vibration that you might be giving out to your friends and other people when you don't talk a lot. It doesn't mean to say that you're antisocial because you're not talking. People are not going to think that you are antisocial. There are other ways of communicating apart from just the word. We tend to feel that the word is the one way that we should be communicating, but something like 80% of our communication is nonverbal, which means that even if you're staying silent, you are actually communicating. But what is it that you are communicating, and what is it that you are revealing in your silent communication? Because you can cover a lot of things with words. You can be very clever with words. You can be very smart, very intelligent with words. But words can hide a lot of the things that we have within that are actually crying to get out, that want to express themselves. And we maybe have had difficulty in the past in expressing oneself. I myself consider myself very lucky, because in my career, especially as a dancer, of course, a dancer's career is silent. You don't talk when you're dancing. So it's a silent career, but it is expressive. It permits you to express a lot of the feelings and the things that are going on inside you. And it is, in that sense, extremely satisfying. I found it very, very satisfying to be a dancer. I really loved being a dancer because it permitted me to express myself. And we often don't always express ourselves to our own satisfaction. And silence will put you in contact with your real self, because in silence, you can't avoid yourself. There are many ways that one can avoid oneself in the world today. But in silence, if you really want to go inside, and silence, we could say that silence is the door to the great indoors. You know how they say in English, the great outdoors, which means the world, basically, nature, what the outdoors might offer. And the great indoors, I'm meaning it in that very wide sense. And the great indoors offers you in an enormous amount of different opportunities, different landscapes, or should I say mindscapes, that you can explore. Your past and everything you can remember is open to you. It's like a book that you can open up and look at and learn from. So silence is, first of all, the rediscovery within yourself that actually peace is within you. Oh, very good. Okay, so talking about silence and looking at what silence actually does for us, if you think around or you look at what's around you, apart from the plants that you might have in your room, they all come from the mind of some human being who has thought about it, reflected, and created what is in front of you, what you have around you. And so silence has had a hand in the furniture that you have around you, the computer you've got in front of you. There has been silence that is basic to our life, basically. But we don't always see it that way. All great inventions, artistic creations come in silence. We can't actually do without it. We need it, really. But to what an extent are we tuned in to silence when we feel that we need to talk? And the thing is to make silence as rich as you can. Silence can be a very enriching experience. It's not a lack of talking. It's an opening up to something that is going to offer you probably much more than you ever thought it could, you know. And you may not be about inventing something or creating an artistic something. You may not be wanting to do that, but it will open up. First of all, it will open up a connection with yourself and realizing that a lot of the things that you really need and want, you have within you. And for example, peace is one of them. We tend to look for peace on the outside. We look for peace when we go to the country or we go to the sea and we have this lovely view of something and we enjoy it. And that makes us feel peaceful. But actually, there is peace within. And when you start using silence, like you might if you meditate, you will start feeling the peace that you have within. And this peace, of course, is always available. It's not like you've got to go to the seaside or you've got to go to the country to feel peaceful. You can feel peaceful if you go within in the middle of a very crowded bus, for example, which is, I like to try these things when I'm traveling. And you go on a bus and everything's very crowded and you go within and it's like a concentration that excludes all the chaos that's around you. And you find that space of inner peace and you feel extremely serene and very, very wonderful. You feel very peaceful and very happy in that space. And that there are many, many riches within. For example, if you think about a baby, for example, a baby expresses basically its basic qualities like peace or love or joy. It expresses them quite spontaneously. Excuse me. But the baby, when it goes into peace, it'll probably fall asleep. Or it expresses love with a contact with the mother, or expresses joy by laughing. It's a very natural expression. And these are things that come naturally. Peace actually can come naturally. It should come naturally. But we are very influenced by what is going on outside and find that although the peace potentially is there, our minds don't allow us to go into peace. Our minds are chattering all the time. And it's this chatter that stops us feeling the peace. And peace is like, when you start off in peace, it's like going into your a drawer or a library that you then rediscover in your own mind. And you cannot really give to others what you yourself have not developed. And in silence is when you can actually develop those things that you would like to express. And you can be clear about what you're actually feeling, what you want to express. You have more, in a certain sense, more control over what you are doing mentally. And you create within that moment of silence an inner space, and it becomes a habit. When we started doing these silence retreats in Gubbio, as Joanna was saying, we would spend a whole week in silence. Now, a whole week sounds an awful long time, you know, and in fact, it is quite a long time, but it doesn't, you get into such a habit of it that you find it difficult then to start communicating by talking. You feel that it's maybe not necessary. And it takes you a few days to get used to talking again, because silence can become very addictive almost, I might say. It's funny, but it's that way. It's very, very pleasant. So let alone even people who used to express fear at going into silence, after a few days realize actually how comfortable it is. It might sound threatening to start with, difficult, you know, but actually when you start it, it isn't. And of course you do meet yourself, and you're creating this space of inner peace within you. And like myself, for example, I'm seeing a space of inner peace where I can think quietly. And that's an inner space that you don't, you know, nobody can go in there unless you invite them. Now, if you invite them, it means that your mind is thinking of them. You don't have to invite anybody into your inner space of peace. And it's up to you to see who you want to invite in there. And of course, obviously, it would be someone which you would, I mean, feel very at ease with. And my whole feeling is that while I'm inside, I like to be thinking of myself as my own best friend. And I then sort of like talk to myself. And I mean, I know it sounds very strange, but it's something that I find very useful, because it makes me very clear. And there is sort of like a dynamic going on where I become the wise person who I'm drawing on the experiences that have matured me in a certain sense, that I have learned from, or there are maybe experiences that I was not mature enough to really learn from. And I can think back like people who play back videos of their holiday with their family, you know, and they remember that. And you can play back a video of your certain scenes in your life and realize that as a more mature person, you see things differently, and you can learn from that. There is an enormous learning that one can actually do from one's own previous experiences. It's really surprising, but unless you think about it, unless you think of those experiences and come to a sort of conclusion about it, you don't progress in that way. You could then, of course, obviously, maybe make the same mistake again further along the line, and you would want to avoid that. When we are doing silence, we realize to what an extent we really are unique. I mean, even people who have very much the same background, they're brought up maybe in the same family, like brothers and sisters. You could even be twins with someone, but the way of thinking is always very, very different. There is a total uniqueness about the inner man, the inner person. And you need to get to know that person, not just looking into the mirror and seeing yourself in the mirror and thinking back, oh, you know, I don't look the same as I did when I was 8 or 9. You know, well, of course you don't. The body has aged, as one might say. And what is it that you recognize in yourself? Because there is a you that continues on and that matures as you go on. I would say that silence is one of the greatest things that will help you mature, but it will help you appreciate the years that you have spent maturing. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I've got to a certain age, and so my life is gone, my life is past. But hold on, that life is still there. Everything you learned, your memories, the things that you created, there is a richness there that you can draw from, and this will help you enormously if for any reason in your life you are, well, I mean, we had the expression of that a few months ago with the lockdowns that we had in Italy. You probably read newspapers and probably saw that Italy had some very, very strict lockdowns for very many weeks where people could hardly leave their houses. And what were you going to do except sit in silence, you know, or look at yourself in the mirror or look at your walls? And it was actually an extraordinary opportunity to work on the inner growth that you get from actually staying in silence and listening to yourself. And certain people took an enormous amount of benefit from that lockdown, which was not well accepted, of course, by people and by the general public. It was very painful to many people. And you discover where your habits are not being able to be satisfied, or your attachments are not being able to be satisfied. And you realize where your difficulties can come from. You know, it's a big, let's say, opening, but that's just something that happened with the lockdowns. But this inner space that you create can be of great consolation. It's a very compassionate space, and it's what you need to create there. You really need to create a unique world, because there is nobody in the world that you can follow and still be yourself. You have to create and, let's say, appreciate what you have done and who you are. And you might say, well, then who am I? You know, and well, you are, there could be different definitions as to who one actually is. But if you look at yourself in the mirror, as I said, you know, we will realize that there's been a big, big difference between your childhood and the present time. And I've had several experiences with friends who I knew as children when I was a child, for example. And this one girl I was at school with, and we actually knew each other quite well because her parents were moving abroad. And so while they were moving, she used to come home on holiday from school with me. And so she stayed with us for about 6 months, you know, and it was like, she was a bit like my sister. And then, of course, when you separate and you're aged 8, you don't ask the person for their address. You don't think of it. And we lost each other. And she found me. I thought she was on the other side of the world, but she found me through our old school and through Google. And consequently, we met. And as I was going down to meet her, I thought, I wonder whether I'll recognize her, you know? And as I met her, and my mind was trying to change the image that I had in my mind of what she looked like, which had obviously changed quite a bit, what I did recognize was her way of talking. She always had a slightly hesitant and thoughtful way of answering you or talking to you. And it was uncanny how clear this came to me as to how this was who she was. And I recognized her more, obviously, by that particular trait than by her physical, the way she physically looked, because there was such a big difference. I mean, it was something like, 65 years of difference, it's enormous. And I'd had other experiences with people who I'd worked with. And again, there'd been a big, big difference. And I didn't recognize this person, this boy that I used to work with. And the one thing that I recognized in him was the way he used his hands. And it's not something that I would have ever thought about, you know. So we recognize people by things that are very, very subtle, not always the physical things. And so giving space to the non-physical is actually very, very, very enriching, because the physical changes, the physical can't really be trusted. It can't stay this, it never will stay the same. I mean, typically our life is constant change. And from the day you're born to the day you die, you are evolving, you're changing, and you're getting older. There's no question about it. And so it's sometimes difficult to actually look at what a person is or who we actually are. We're not only a physical being. We are a physical being having a totally spiritual experience. And how deep a spiritual experience I want to have depends entirely on me. I mean, I can live very superficially, and maybe I'll enjoy that, but maybe I will be disappointed, and most likely I will be. But there is a lot to be said for maturing oneself within silence and getting to know, because the whole aim at getting to know oneself is to actually become one's own best friend. You know, loving the self is probably one of the most difficult things we can do, because we tend to look at what is lacking. If I had this quality, that is what could have happened. If only I was like so-and-so, things would have been much better in my life. Well, forget all of that. You know, what is that you have actually accumulated in your life? And have you really even looked at it? And probably, I mean, my experience was I hadn't really looked at it. And when we started doing these silence weeks, I'd never thought of staying for a whole week in silence, but it was suggested that we do this. And I thought, yeah, we have to see how we can fill silence. And the fact is, once you open the door to silence, you find an enormous amount to do. And let's say you begin to realize really who you are and how your personality it actually creates itself on spiritual basis of actually the qualities that you have. And your energy, that is what you are basically. And that peace, love, and joy is what will, mixing together, is what will create your personality. And you start realizing the artistic creation that your actual personality is. Because if you look at it, it's like an artist that has the three primary colors, which are, you know, yellow, red, and blue. And those are the primary colors that you can't make. You absolutely have to have them. And you mix them together, and of course you get orange and green and all of that. And, you know, if you look at peace as being blue, let's say, and love being red, or joy being yellow, the way you harmonize these things, like patience, is like, say, mixing peace and love. And each particular expression of patience will depend on the mixture that you put there. If you're waiting in a doctor's office, for example, and these are things you'll realize of yourself, when you're waiting in a doctor's office, you're probably using more peace than you are love. Where if you're looking after your child, for example, you're probably using an enormous amount of love while you're doing it. And you will find that a lack of peace will make it very difficult to be patient, for example, or to be tolerant. And you suddenly discover these sort of things about yourself. It's a wonderful terrain of discovery. Children love discovering. We've lost, maybe as adults, we've lost that fascination for discovery, you know. But if you think about all the beauty that you could actually create in that way, and that your personality is something that you yourself have created. It's, you know, when you think that you're not a victim of what's gone on and what's happened. You might think that, and a lot of things have pushed us into doing this and forced us into doing that, and we've been obliged in a certain sense, and we've maybe gone along with what other people wanted. But if we can step back and realize that we do have our life in our own hands, and the quality of life in our own hands, we can develop that enormously through the use of silence. And there is, of course, in each one of us, when you become an adult, you have a sort of like a library of experiences. And you can bring back up these ideas, these experiences, the thoughts you had, and realize what the thread is that actually runs through your life. And I would say that very close to what your identity is, the thread that runs through your life is probably your values. And your values can be values that your family taught you, that come from your actual direct family and the way they thought, the way they behaved. Then you might have cultural values that are more on the level of the society that you move in. Or you might have values that you have yourself discovered as you went along, and you might call them best practices, if you like, and you have learnt going along your life what was right and what was wrong, and you created a better way of doing things. And these are very strong values because you yourself have learned them. They're not acquired, that you yourself have put them into practice. And it's good to review all of that. You know, it's nice to read old books that we have read already and enjoyed. It's a little bit like that. And except that when you're in silence, you don't want to take a real book and read it, because that's putting in something into inside you, when in fact you want to read what's inside you and not something from outside. So it's good to just concentrate on what's going on with you, and what are the lessons that life has taught you. What are the things that you still think you need to learn, and what is it that you should do to be able to do that, to learn. You know, it's a very big learning experience. And what means is that you can sit back and watch what's going on. And it's life, as I said, is a teaching experience. And what can I learn, and what do I need to learn? Because none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. But our relationship with ourselves can become very, very pleasant and very satisfying if we really like ourselves. Now, you don't have to be perfect to like yourself, but you do have to be happy about, and let's say, I'd say almost proud of yourself. And you are the only one that knows just how much you've worked on certain things to create the character and the personality that you've got. While you're looking through this library of things, there is a possibility that somewhere along the line, there will be some form of pain that will emerge. And it will be a pain that is linked from the past. And the funny thing is that very often our life moves on, our life changes, but the pain remains. We somehow have not, it's like we've not deactivated that pain somehow. And this is something like what I'm saying, the inner child work that can be done. And there are many, many indications. I mean, I'm not an expert on the inner child work, but we will all come to see this kind of thing happening. And what happened in my childhood or what happened in my youth was I hurt or betrayed or shamed or, bullied. All of these things can happen when we're children and when we're young and don't know how to understand what people are doing, and how sometimes people can say things that they don't really understand the harm they can do when they say it. And that remains, the pain remains till we actually we need to remove these thorns. And we are the only ones that can really do it. Other people can help you, but you need to realize that everything is changed. The time has changed. You are a different person. And if you can give yourself that love and that credibility, because everything has moved on, you can see what you now have become and what you are doing with yourself. And you give the credibility to yourself, and the thorn comes out. Whatever those other people did or whatever those other people said, you can't give any credibility to it anymore. And when you don't trust and believe that, the pain disappears. And this is what you can do. Each one will find their own way of doing it. Some need to be compassionate, others need to just understand. It all depends. But this is also a work that will come up, and one shouldn't be afraid of it. There will be uncomfortable moments, because I realized that when we were doing the silence weeks, 7 days is quite a long time. After about 3 days, the silence becomes actually quite uncomfortable. Why? Because there is this little voice inside that has been just dying to be listened to. And we've got on with life, and we've done all kinds of things, and we've sort of wanted to do other things, but we've not really listened to this little voice. And the little voice has stayed silent, but it's because in a certain sense we've not been willing to listen. And if at one point we do stop and we do silence, and for several days we don't talk, then the little voice feels that it has an opportunity, a chance to be listened to. And whatever it is that is brewing, like I might say, inside you, you will eventually hear it in silence. And you can then look at it and unravel it. And there's a lot of unraveling going on in silence. I mean, I suggest for anybody who does it that they write down their experiences. Because when you go out of the silence and you start talking again, every now and again, to create a contact with the inner work that you did during the silence, it's good to have it written down. And you'll suddenly realize it's like being in silence is like, as I said, the great indoors. You can travel a lot mentally. You really can. And you can travel through great spaces and time very quickly. And it's good to consequently to write it down, so that when you look back, you can see the journey that you actually went through, what you actually experienced. And this will help you for future. Silence is something that once you've done it, you'll probably do it again, because you will see the great benefits. And it has a mellowing effect on the soul. We feel much more mellow when we do silence, because of course when you're in silence, any immediate reaction is not really possible verbally. The only thing you can do if you're upset is to get up and leave. You can't talk, you can't say. And so consequently, that immediate reaction where you come bursting out of your silence will not happen, because you are in that inner space. And it's very good to feel that inner space is comfortable. You really have to make it very comfortable. I mean, I enjoy seeing my inner space, and it's like my favorite room, which in my mind, I've decorated in the way I like it, and it feels warm and comfortable, and it's exactly what I feel I need. And I have alternate spaces too. There's not only that one space, there are other spaces also that I use depending on my own feelings. What is it I need? You can satisfy your needs. We, especially women actually, we spend a lot of our lives satisfying other people's needs. We don't always think of our own. And this is an opportunity for you to really, really see what your needs are and what your needs are deep down, that in such a way that they can be satisfied by you yourself. Now, if you can satisfy your own emotional needs and become your own best friend, that is the absolute best outcome that you can possibly have from your silence. I mean, it teaches you to like yourself, to appreciate yourself, because there is only you really know you as well as you know you. I mean, nobody knows you better than you do. And in silence, it actually is quite difficult to lie to yourself. You can pretend all kinds of things with other people, and a number of people will believe you. You can get away with it, pretending one thing or another. But you can't do that with yourself. You've got to be very honest. And I think this makes you, when you take this into consideration and do it, I think it really makes you very compassionate for the difficulties that you've had and how you admire how you fought, the courage you had, the fact that certain things in life demanded that you be literally heroic. Well, only you maybe know that, just how difficult it actually was. Other people may not have noticed even. They may not have really realized what you were going through. But you can realize it, and you can admire that in yourself. Admiring certain things that you see you did well by looking in your past and realizing that you were right to make that decision, you were right to do certain things, is very healing. It gives you that feeling of really being your own best friend. And there's nothing actually better than that, because as you go along, you become a very strong adult. You become a determined adult who feels very comfortable with their own decisions and don't depend on other people for a decision. They take advice, they listen to people, but they know what is right for them, and they're not tending towards other people's ideas because they know what's right for them. And you can't really know unless you've done some form of inner work. And of course, that inner work has got to be done in silence, right? And so, you are the only one who really can get to know yourself. And I think, basically being your own best friend is probably the best thing you could ever, ever, ever have. It's the best friend you could possibly have in your life. I mean, I often think, because now I'm getting on, I'm 80 now. And I'm thinking, all of those years that I did spend a lot of time thinking, a lot of time of being with myself, a lot of time analyzing my past and analyzing what I did and why I did it and the choices I made and the decisions I made and were they right and how did they come out. And this is a wonderful companionship, and it's a wonderful, peaceful companionship to have when you get to a certain age. It really is. I mean, a lot of older people feel lonely, they feel left out in some way or another. Most people have some space in their life where they can feel very lonely at times. And this will, if you can become your own best friend and you have that inner richness, you will pass over those moments very, very easily. I've noticed people, who can do this, and they exude, let's say, an inner richness which makes you want to sit beside them and talk to them, and they unless you question, they probably will remain very silent, you know. And that's just because of the richness comes from the inner work that they do. And so learning to remove the thorns, as I said, the thorns that have remained inside and that we discover as we go along, because, you know, as we live our life, we tend to pass over what was difficult, swallow the pain, as one says, and keep moving, you know, and you maybe don't go back to see really what happened and whether any suffering remained. And you need to clean out these moments. And so that is another part of the work that you can do when you are in your inner sanctum of peace and silence. And so loving yourself is probably one of the greatest challenges that you will receive, because it's, again, you can't fool yourself. You've got to be honest with yourself. But it is a very, very nice feeling of being at ease with oneself, because I think that's the very best aim and objective one can have in life, is to be able to sit, you know, just thinking about it, all of a sudden, we were given a theme to write about at school. And there was a French philosopher who said, a French writer, who said that all the problems of humanity come from the fact that people can't sit alone in a room. You know, and when we were doing silence, this sort of came up in my mind, you know, and I remember as a child having been absolutely fascinated by this homework that we'd been given. We'd been given this homework, you know, and I was thinking about it, but I was a child. I was still a young teenager, you know, when we were asked to comment on this. And I was thinking, why can humanity not sit alone in a room, you know? And it's a saying that keeps coming up. And to be able to actually sit alone in a room and feel peaceful and happy and satisfied and content and compassionate towards humanity is, I think, one of the greatest achievements that you can have in life. But it's a very personal one. Maybe nobody will see it, but you will experience it, you will feel it, and others around you will feel the richness of your experience. So I don't know if there are any questions at this point.
Wendy, would you like, before the questions, to lead us to a meditation experience into
if you like,
silence?
If you
and
like.
Then we can have the questions.
Yeah, it'll give them more time to write their questions, if you like, if they have any. We'll see.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I look within. I dive deep within myself. What experience do I want today? And I see myself in my inner garden. My inner world is a beautiful garden. Immense lawns, tall trees. And in this garden, I cultivate flowers. My flowers are of many colors. There is the yellow of cheerfulness, and the lilac of serenity, and the red of courage. These are the flowers that I cultivate within my inner garden. And the space is not small, but it is vast. As large as my mind can imagine. There are no limits. And on the lawn, each blade of grass is like a thought. And my thoughts dance, undulate with the wind of emotion. And at times, clouds come over my garden and rain falls. But with the return of the sun, my grass grows greener and my flowers become more colorful. In my garden, I have a best friend. He is the head gardener. He advises me, gives me courage, appreciates each different flower, and will point out any weed that I need to take out. My flowers are the best things that I have. They make beautiful gifts for my friends. Each one of us has within them a garden, personal and special. But we are shy, and we don't reveal the beauty within because we ourselves have not yet discovered it. But there will come a day when our gardens will open and we'll invite others through trust and love to walk on our green grass all together. Shanti.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for your beautiful insights on silence. We have some questions here. One of them is, which were the biggest obstacles that you personally found to merge into silence? And how did you overcome them? And did you manage to turn these obstacles into an opportunity to learn?
I think the biggest obstacle was thinking that it was difficult. Because you imagine the complications because you've never done it in the beginning. But when you start, you realize that there is no pressure. Silence is freedom. There is no pressure. And this is something that was apparent in Gubbio, because people would come to me after we started the silence and they'd say, is there a class tomorrow at 10 o'clock or something? You know, I don't know. What should I do? I said, I don't know. I said, if you're tired, you can go to bed if you like. You can stay in bed all day if you like. Silence is freedom. Go for a walk, you know. And we put pressure on ourselves. And I think that going into silence, we put even more pressure on ourselves. And in fact, the very first thing you should do is not put any pressure on yourself and just wait to see what comes up. And the questions that you can ask yourself will only come later in accordance with the thoughts that happen. And you'll say to yourself, well, what's that thought? And what is that linked to? And why did that happen? And where did that get born? And where did that come from? And slowly, slowly, you will find that it's very easy. You don't have to put pressure on yourself. So I think it's overcoming that first challenge. That's all really, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Another question for the chat box is, what if silence hurts the person in a way that makes it antisocial and depressed?
You know, what's nice about being in silence, and this is one of the things that I must admit we had a great benefit from doing it in Gubbio at the retreat center, because there was a group of us. And we were doing silence together. Now, a challenge in silence would be, let's say, eating in silence. Eating is a social activity, you know, where we tend to talk. And it's sort of it's against the habit to sit in silence. But if silence is the chosen way that you're eating, it is incredibly freeing, incredibly liberating, and the communication, the non-verbal communication keeps up. It goes on. And just the thing is that it's very sweet, which means that when you're finished your eating, you can take your plate and leave, and you don't have to wait till the other person has finished with the conversation that they've started. It's very liberating. But of course, you know, if you're doing it alone, you might feel that you are withdrawing from society in a certain sense. And this is why doing it alone, actually, or doing it in a way that other people are not doing it, you know, doing it in that sense, can make you feel actually quite isolated. You can feel that you are at a disadvantage. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's important, like I see on the chat, there is a question that is very important. Does silence include staying away from YouTube?
Yes.
Right? That's an important one. And I'll tell you why I picked up on it is because we used to tell people, you know, don't come to a silence week and bring books with you that you've always wanted to read. You've got all of these books that you thought you were going to read, and you take them to the silence week. Well, if you're doing that, you're not doing silence, you see. Silence is stopping anything that's coming in from the outside so that you can see what's going on the inside. You don't want to keep on stacking things inside. You want to listen to that little voice that has been wanting to talk to you for a long time. Call it the voice of your conscience or call it what you like. And it's good to listen, to give respect to that voice. You know? And that way you can calm that little voice that could be anxious or whatever, some form of anxiety that you might have, or some form of pain from the past. It's good to look at these things and not obliterate them with noise, you know.
Okay, thank you. Now, this answer of yours brings out a question from my side that is it not possible to reach a state where, although there is noise external, we are moving, walking, doing what we have to do, can maintain this sweet silence inside and see everything as out there as an observer? Is it possible to reach that state? And is it easy? Does it need a lot of work? Did you manage to get into that?
I think we looked upon it to start with as a game. And I really didn't want silence to be an isolation. I wanted the silence to be an experience that was warm, friendly, joyful, and just removing the words. And we used to, in Gubia, we used to go out and pick the cherries and make cherry jam and did all kinds of things together. We went for walks. We'd go and sit in the forest and feel the trees and the vibration of the lake. I mean, it is wonderful to come into contact with nature when you're in silence. Nature will accept your silence totally, because nature stays very often in silence, right? Unless there's wind or something. And so it's very natural. It's extremely natural. And it's more difficult, of course, in a city, but it is quite easy, actually. It's much easier than you might think. This is what's so nice about it.
Thank you. Another question, Sister Wendy, is how did you cultivate your relationship with God? Because in silence, we can feel God more.
Very definitely. I mean, to me, of course, my head gardener in my inner garden is God. Now, you can express him in whichever way you feel like, but to me, of course, he is the one person that I will invite into my into my room, and I will converse with him as to what's going on. And I might have my inner room with my window that I'm looking out onto the world, and I will try and feel from the presence that I have invoked what his thoughts are, what his feelings are, and I will express myself and listen. That's where you get to listen. Listening is different to chanting or singing or praying or any of those things. Just listening is just being with someone that is powerful and knowledgeful is incredible. And of course, that is the one person, if that is what you like, that's the one person to invite into your inner room, your inner space, of course.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Wendy. You mentioned previously in your session that the best person to invite in your silence actually is yourself. So it's ourself together with God.
Yes.
And is this kind of silence that you are describing enhancing creativity?
Yes, it does. because there is no form of creativity that it doesn't start from silence. You know, it all depends on the kind of creativity that you like. I mean, I worked in an artistic field, which means that I'm very, very sensitive to music. I'm sensitive to, of course, dance. And it's good to know what you're sensitive to. And this will feed your, if you have creative capacities, you know, creative capacities sometimes get blocked after early childhood, you know, and that's a great tragedy because every human being has an immense amount of creativity, and this will free that creativity up and you will start doing something that gives you deep inner satisfaction. I think creativity does that. It will give you maybe only just, you know, cultivating the flowers in your inner garden. It's something that goes on in the mind. It's not, you're not going to go outside and water them, you know, but watering them with your thoughts can be extremely creative, and you will feel attracted by that creativity, and that your own creativity will make you happy with yourself. It will make you feel very pleased at being you. You know, these are things that you need to do. You need to do things that make you happy with yourself, that make you admire yourself, that make you say, wow, you know, that didn't think I could do that. You know, there's two parts of us, of course. There's the part that thinks we can, but is not sure. And then there's a part that thinks we can't. And you need to sort of quieten that voice as it goes away, and you realize what your own inner creativity is like. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. And another question from the chat box is how we can maintain calmness, peace, and tranquility. If I read well, something like that. Yes.
Yeah. You know, it really depends on the thoughts that you allow to come into your mind. Not all thoughts that we have should be just accepted as something that should come in. There are thoughts that will come that will be disruptive to your inner peace. And those are thoughts that you need to undo. You need to wipe them away. And each one can have their own way of doing that. Sometimes you can do it in a visual way, which of course is very creative. But sometimes you can just superimpose another thought and say, you know, that thought does not coincide with your values or your qualities inside that you recognize of yourself. And so there is something that is influencing you to have that kind of a thought. And then you substitute that thought with something positive and creative. And what is positive and creative will bring you happiness. What is negative will bring you unhappiness. It's very simple. And so to avoid that unhappiness, it is good to constantly be creative. We are creative energies. Don't let's create our own unhappiness by promoting unhappy thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
On
you.
the other hand, I would say difficulties have to be faced. You know, I'm not saying that you can always be happy. Of course you can't. It's not always possible. Difficulties have to be faced, but in a very positive way. It's what can I do about them? What can I creatively do about this negativity or problem or obstacle I've got? You know, and overcome it in that way. What can I do that is positive?
Thank you very much. There is more questions, I think, if we can take them. How do you know, yes, how do you know when it's a real silence or a blank mind, a lazy mind?
Well, you know, I suggest that If you've got a blank mind and lazy mind, I suggest you go to sleep. That's fine. You know, in silence, you're free. But, you know, you will get very bored sleeping. You know, at times I think your mind switches off because you're just too exhausted. Life is quite tiring these days. It really is. With all the, I mean, I'm thinking of the difference between my childhood and now, and the way life has speeded up, and all the things that a child needs to know before they grow up. I mean, when I was a child, in my early childhood, television had only started. It came in during my childhood. So you had much more time to think. We had no internet. My family had no telephone. So you had a lot of time to think. You weren't constantly being drawn out of your inner person to satisfy or listen to something else or someone else, or have something, some image imposed upon you. I mean, you need to be very selective, I think, now. So I wouldn't worry too much about a lazy mind, because the more you go into silence, the more active your mind will be. It stimulates creativity, of course. So you will have all kinds of wonderful ideas. And so just try it.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, another question. Maybe this is going to be the last question we can take. What if you cannot face the pain of the silence or inner child work? How much should you push yourself? When to stop?
I don't think it's good to push at all. I think that your experiences in silence should always be positive. And if you are finding that you really are having problems or difficulties or pain that keep coming up that you don't seem to be able to alleviate, remove, seek professional help. Do that, because professional help is there for that. Mm-hmm. And you can then express to whoever you've chosen what's going on, and they can help you. Because inner silence has got to be something positive, creative, compassionate, and it must have a positive outcome. That's the whole idea. And it, you know, maybe there are things that we need help over. You know, some people need help to just concentrate, you know what I mean? This is where meditation can help. And so meditating regularly means that you will already be familiar with a certain form of silence. You will know what to be doing with it. You will know how to guide your mind away from things that are making you upset or negative, you know. But as I'm saying, you know, if you really are having problems, seek help, because you don't want to make an enemy of yourself inside. You see what I mean? The whole idea is to be your own friend, to heal whatever you feel needs healing. Maybe there is something that needs healing.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think we're going to stop here. And Wendy, thank you so much for your insights and your time, offering your time to all of us. And I would like also to thank Harmony House Meditation Center, as well as all the team in Bahrain Meditation Center that they work behind the scenes. And just an announcement before we close. Tomorrow at 6:30 Kuwait time, there is meditation in Arabic with Mona Al-Arfad. Please join us. So thank you very much. And good night. Thanks to all. Thank you.